Thank you very much. Welcome to Hey Siri, Find My Ex, Tech-Enabled Abuse in the Apple Ecosystem. This is less of a technical talk about how to take things apart and more a sort of overview of how things are going, narrator voice, badly, and also a little bit about what researchers have done, what researchers can do in the future, and sort of like where people like you can really influence the direction of this terrible clusterfuck I'm about to describe to you. So let's start with the question you're probably asking yourself, which is, who the hell are you? I am Eva Galperin. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I am also the co-founder of the Coalition Against Stalkerware. We don't like it. You can reach me at eva@eff.org. And I still do, unfortunately, occasionally post to the Hell site, where I am Evacide, and I am also Evacide on Mastodon and Blue Sky and all of the places that are not the Hell site. So we're going to start with just getting to the basics, which is what is tech-enabled intimate partner abuse? I assume all of you know what intimate partner abuse is. One of the sort of things that we have seen in recent years is a rise in the use of technology as part of intimate partner abuse as a way of engaging in coercive control, which is a fancy way of saying spying and stalking. Now, one of the big differences between sort of intimate partner abuse, say, 20 or 30 years ago and intimate partner abuse in the year of our Lord 2024 is that all of us carry tracking devices around in our pockets. We have filled our houses with always-on microphones and cameras, and we tell the microphones and the cameras and the tracking device in our pocket all about where we are, what we're doing, what our passwords are, pictures of what we're up to, who we're hanging out with. We engage in all of our daily communications largely through these devices. And this makes them extremely tempting targets for hackers, for criminals, for governments and law enforcement, and it turns out also for domestic abusers. Big surprise there. So now most of you have probably heard of the kind of malware that governments and law enforcement uses in order to spy on the tracking devices that we keep in our pockets all the time. That's usually stuff like NSO Group's Pegasus. This stuff is very fancy, it's very sexy, it usually uses a vast variety of ODAs. Everybody loves reporting on it. And when people think that they have problems with their phones, the first thing that they do is they call me up and they say, I have Pegasus on my phone. And I say, you don't have Pegasus on your phone. And they say, how do you know? I'm like, you don't. You just what do these people sometimes have on their phones? Just commercial grade stalkerware. It turns out that if you are a domestic abuser and if you are purchasing this stuff in order to covertly install it on somebody else's device, you are an abuser, just like de facto. It turns out that there is an entire commercial ecosystem of software that is designed to be covertly installed on someone else's device for the purpose of exfiltrating data from that device. And that is what we call stalkerware. Now, at the end of this talk, someone will almost certainly raise their hand and they will say, I have put parental controls on my kid's phone that report to me my kid's location, and my kid knows about it, and my kid can see the parental controls on their phone, and it is a reason why we are able to trust one another. Am I a stalker? And I go, no, because you have their consent. Like this is not particularly difficult, but for some strange reason, every time I give this talk, there's at least one person in the audience who does not understand how consent works. I will also get this question about, I am trying to keep track of the location of my senile parent. Or someone else that they need to keep track of, and that's fine. If you need to keep track of somebody else's location or even what they are doing on their device, I am not going to stop you, but you should not have to do it secretively. It should not be done with software that deliberately hides from the person who owns the device and leaves them with the impression that they are not being tracked, so they cannot look for the software and therefore they cannot remove it. That's going to save me a lot of trouble later. So how do these bad people find the stalkerware in order to install it onto a variety of iOS devices? Well, that's one of the few things that Google's still good for. Good news, everyone. All you have to do is just go like, hey Siri, how do I track my partner? Or enter, how do I track my partner's iPhone into Google, and a bunch of blog posts, which are really ads masquerading as blog posts, will come up, as well as just plain ads. Ads for stalkerware are theoretically against Google's terms of service, and they should not be serving them. But we see them come through all the time, just as stalkerware itself is theoretically against the terms of service in the Apple Store, as well as against Google's terms of service in its Android stores, and that stuff still gets through anyway, somehow. It's a mystery. Speaking of mysteries, this is a mystery slide. All right. So what does the abuser do in order to install this stuff on somebody else's device? They start by Googling. They find the stalkerware of their choice. They purchase a license for the stalkerware. Then the abuser enters the target's Apple ID and password into the stalkerware website. The stalkerware company uses the credentials to log into the target's account and downloads data from iCloud backups of devices. And finally, the abuser logs into the stalkerware web portal to view the data, which is updated with every iCloud backup. Now, what the stalkerware purchaser is actually purchasing is access to the portal. So they pay like a monthly subscription in order to continue to get this. And what this means is that the people who are selling stalkerware absolutely know that this stuff is being used for stalking and that this stuff is being used for abuse. And if you want to abuse them just a little bit longer, you got to pay up. This also means that the makers of stalkerware are storing all of the exfiltrated data. Sometimes they don't do a particularly good job of protecting it, and there have been many cases in which the entire C2 infrastructure of a stalkerware app and the entire portal has been left either wide open or open to a very, very simple vulnerability, which means that not only is all of that information available to the stalker, but that information is available to anyone who bothers to look. So that's great for everybody. Companies also will sell an iPhone preloaded with stalkerware so that you can just give it to your partner. Here, honey, this is fine. Or you can do it like this. The abuser purchases a license for the stalkerware. The abuser gets physical access to the phone. Again, the abuser usually lives with or is within physical proximity to the person that they're abusing, so access to the phone is really no big deal. The abuser then roots or jailbreaks the phone, sometimes with tech support from the stalkerware company, which is particularly great. You can actually sit there in a chat with people from the stalkerware company who will walk you through rooting and jailbreaking the phone. The abuser then installs the stalkerware, and then the abuser logs into the web portal to view the data. Again, this means the stalkerware company is, in fact, storing all of the exfiltrated data, and the chances that they're protecting it is actually quite low. So in an effort to combat breached iCloud accounts, Apple has made several security improvements to their services over the years that help to make iCloud more secure. First, 2FA was introduced, and over time it's become the default setting for Apple IDs. That only took a disturbingly long time. This is an effective mitigation against abusers who don't have physical access to their target's phone, but it's less helpful for survivors who still have to live with and share space with their abusers. There is no point in having 2FA that shows up as a notification on somebody's phone screen if you're trying to protect against somebody who can simply pick up your phone and write that notification down. Apple has recently put more restrictions relating to iCloud into place. This makes it much more difficult for external services such as spyware to retrieve backup data from iCloud, whether the account has two-factor authentication or not. And this is one of the reasons why you will see a lot of complaints from people who use this stalkerware that they're really only able to get the sort of scraping of the iCloud data about once a day. That is someone at Apple being extremely unpleasant. So how effective are the iCloud mitigations? Certo, a member of the Coalition Against Stalkerware, took a look at the top 25 stalkerware apps. Of those 25 apps, only 3 offer an iCloud solution that could allegedly get all the data from the iCloud backup of a phone. They tested iCloud products from these 3 spyware providers with an Apple ID that had two-factor authentication turned on, as well as another Apple ID that didn't. None of the products were able to retrieve data from the backup in their test iCloud accounts. So how about partial data? Of the original 25, a further 7 spyware providers also claim to be able to steal data from iCloud, but in a more limited way. Rather than acquiring a full backup from iCloud, they claim to be able to download data that has been synced with iCloud. However, this can still include things like iMessages, contacts, photos, and real-time location, which seems like it might be useful to a stalker. We tested all 7 of these services. Certo tested all 7 of these services. I tested nothing. And their 2 test Apple IDs, only 2 of them could successfully download the sync data from iCloud. The other 5 failed to establish a connection to Apple's servers, regardless of whether the account had 2FA turned on or not. That's enough. So does this mean that stalkerware has been eliminated on iOS devices? No. So this is a web watcher. It uses a feature called iTunes Wi-Fi Sync, which has a built-in iOS feature used to back up an iPhone to a user's computer on the same network, as opposed to using a USB connection. This feature is instead used by WebWatcher as a way to retrieve the data from the phone onto a computer on the same network. Again, if you are living with someone, the chances that your devices will end up on the same Wi-Fi, pretty high. This could either be the attacker's computer or the victim's own computer. In addition to this, the hacker can also set up a feature that will cause the iPhone to automatically back up all its data to the computer every time the phone is synced via the network. Usually this is overnight when it's connected to Wi-Fi. Does this work? Sort of. WebWatcher reviews are full of complaints about the limitations of this product, including the lack of real-time data unless you're on the same network. It's also very easy to detect because you just need to check to see if iTunes Wi-Fi Sync is turned on. But let me tell you, most of the people who call me up telling me they have Pegasus on their phone have not checked for this. Most methods of spying on iOS devices these days are detectable through a thorough review of device and account settings. One of the things that Apple did in recent years was they put out a manual for what they call sort of close access safety problems. And this is called device and data access when personal safety is at risk. In addition to this, just because not enough people were actually reading the manual, as you, the people who actually read manuals, probably know, they introduced a application, well, not really an application, they introduced a sort of menu item called Safety Check, which will actually walk you through all of your applications and settings and will show you what is being shared with whom, which is one of the ways in which you can really find applications that are, requesting all kinds of access that they should not be asking for, or the kinds of misconfigurations that often enable stalkerware to work. This is also really good at catching the kinds of misconfigurations that don't involve stalkerware at all, but that allow a former partner who used to have access to all of your stuff to continue to see some portion of your stuff simply because you forgot to lock them out effectively. And let me tell you, that's probably the most common problem that I see. So in addition to all this, in iOS 16, Apple also introduced lockdown mode. Lockdown mode is great if you're worried about being targeted by Pegasus. It limits your ability to do some things online. You're not going to get like, little link previews, for example, REP to those. On the other hand, it is actually not that great for commercial grade stalkerware. And that is perfectly fine because honestly, even the people who are likely to be targeted by Pegasus do not use lockdown mode often enough. But there's good news, which is that starting around like 2021, 2022, we started to see a big decrease in the use, or at least detection of, and if you do malware research, you understand that it's very hard to tell the difference between these two things, of stalkerware. The bad news is it might be because now abusers have something cheaper and simpler. So in 2020, Apple came out with the AirTag. And it was bad. So the whole idea behind the AirTag is that, it's about the size of a quarter. It uses Bluetooth. It syncs to your phone. You then attach it to a thing that you are concerned about possibly losing, like your keys or your wallet or your mind. And when the object goes outside of Bluetooth range, then the Find My network sort of all works together in order to report the location of the AirTag. And this is great for when you have lost your keys or your wallet. And unfortunately, it's also really great for stalking. So over the course of the next, I would go with 2 to 2.5 years, Apple spent a lot of time trying to cover its ass over how sloppily they rolled out the AirTag. The AirTag was rolled out with some anti-stalking mitigations, and Apple immediately patted itself on the back, nearly sprained something. It was patting itself so hard because other Bluetooth-enabled trackers came with no anti-stalking mitigations. And so executives at Apple said things like, oh, the AirTag is stalker-proof. So in, I think, December of 2022, they were sued by people who have been stalked using the AirTag. So that will teach them to open their mouths. And ever since then, they have been making more and more tweaks to their anti-stalking mitigations, presumably in order to make them more effective. I will now tell you about some of them. So before I do, first I should probably tell you that one of the big problems with having AirTags everywhere, AirTags are in fact different from the existing, kind of Bluetooth devices that you would attach to your wallet, something like a Tile or a Samsung SmartTag, because they use the Find My network. As a result of which, they are pretty much ubiquitous. We see them everywhere. And also, because up until fairly recently, there were so many different holes that they could exploit in order to continue tracking people, we had a lot of unaware victims being tracked using these things. And they were taking advantage of these sort of vast networks for long-range tracking. Why does this matter? Because we're going to go into long-range tracking, because you might go all day without encountering somebody with, say, the Tile app installed on their phone and Bluetooth turned on. But I dare you to go all day without getting within Bluetooth distance of an iOS device with Find My turned on. And so the snitch network is vast, and with great power comes great responsibility, and or lawsuits, also lawsuits. So Apple did a few things. When they launched the AirTag, they had these pop-up notices. When it launched, it took 3 days of tracking, of having a AirTag move with you before the notice would go off, or before it would issue a little sound alert. So three free days of stalking. It's fine, totally stalker-proof. And that they have slowly tightened down from 3 days to 24 hours to 8 hours to I've seen cases where this has actually gone off in 3 hours. That does not mean that it will automatically go off in like 3 to 8 hours every single time, which is something that we will be talking about a little bit later in this talk. If, on the other hand, at the time that the AirTag launched, you were unfortunate enough not to own an iPhone, if you existed, you fool, in the Android ecosystem, then you had to rely on the little beep. That's all that was going to tell you that there's an AirTag following you. And of course, the first thing that I did was I got my hands on an AirTag, and I found like half a dozen ways to silence the beep, up to and including simply putting it between the cushions in the back seat of a car. That was enough. The beep was like 60 dB, which is less loud than your dishwasher.
I thought there was a difference between the AirTag, between the AirTag if you owned it and if it was owned by somebody else. The software differentiated that?
Yes, absolutely. That's kind of the point.
AirTag,
yes, if it is your own AirTag, it will not go off. It only tells you if it is the AirTag alerts a phone if it is not the phone with the account that it is paired to. So in addition to that, AirTag had a reset problem, which is that if your AirTag came back within Bluetooth distance of the phone that it was paired to, then that 36 and then 12 and then 8 hour sort of window before it would notify you that you were being followed reset. And do you know how often most people see an abuser that they say work with or live with? At least once every 24 hours. So that was not super helpful. And obviously, this created a whole lot of loopholes. They spent a lot of time trying to close these loopholes. One of the first things that they did was they created an Android equivalent of the app that would allow you to track whether or not there was an AirTag in your immediate vicinity. And that looked like, here we go. It was called Tracker Detect, and it's perhaps mean to use the past tense. But so Apple put out this app for Android. It is called Tracker Detect. It is about as good as you can expect an Android app built by Apple to be, which is to say it was crap. But it at least gave you the ability to scan for an AirTag if there was one in your immediate vicinity. I, of course, being a jerk, immediately put it to the test. I got myself a small army of graduate students at Duke. We got together the most common sort of Bluetooth-enabled trackers. So that was, we got out a Samsung SmartTag, a AirTag, a Chipolo. I think that was it. And then we tested out the most common tracking detecting apps. which include AirGuard, which says that it can detect sort of all the different types of trackers, to Tracker Detect, which detects only AirTags. Oh yes, and finally Tile. I'm going to yell at Tile a lot in a minute. Man, I'm so mad at Life 360. And then finally, Tile's built-in app, which allows you to see whether or not there is a tile following you. As you can see from this lovely graphic, these things don't work well. They kind of suck. A world in which, in order to make sure that you are not being tracked by a physical tracker, you need to download an app for every single different type of physical tracker and then run a scan every time you want to make sure that you are safe, is a hell world. And that is where we are now, except the scanners don't even work very well. So what we have here is sort of an example of what Tile is doing. Just in case you thought that Apple was crappy and irresponsible, when Tile had these physical trackers for many years using much less powerful networks, which is why they did not take off quite as terrifyingly as the AirTag. But that's okay, because Life 360's plan is to try to expand that network as much as possible in order to compete with the AirTag. But that's fine, because what they did was they added an ability to scan for tiles into their app. You did not need to have a tile of your own, but you did need to know that this was something that you could do. You did need to download it, and you did need to be able to run a scan. And so you would think, okay, fine, cool, you did the responsible thing. I should give you a cookie. And I would have given them a cookie if they had not included the ability to turn it off. What Tile did was they said, well, listen, it's fine. You can absolutely detect tiles to see whether or not they're following you, unless the owner of the tile puts it in anti-theft mode, which surely no stalker will ever do. Because really, people got to be able to find their stuff when it gets stolen. People's stuff is so much more important than other people's physical safety. An actual argument that I have had. Apple and Google chose in 2023 to do something really unusual, which was to work together. And what they have done is Apple shared its code having to do with detecting the presence of an AirTag. And last year, in the latest version of Android, Google rolled out functionality that would allow their Androids to alert you if they found an AirTag nearby, using, as far as I can tell, pretty much the same rules as the AirTag does with iOS. One giant red flag that you should see on this slide is, please note, Google's delay to its own tracker ecosystem. Google absolutely could not wait to get in on the action, build its own physical tracker. And a lot of this sort of hullabaloo, including both security research and lawsuits, is one of the reasons why there isn't a Google physical tracker yet. So we did some good. So how are we really going to fix this? Well, unfortunately, I think that the answer is standards. This is the Detecting Unwanted Location Trackers working group at the IETF. Standards making is the single most boring process known to man, but it is also the area where all of the stakeholders come together, and they are talking about what a standard that all makers of Bluetooth-enabled physical trackers should be using in order to make their trackers detectable. This is extremely slow going. The group really only formed last year, and it's expected to have some sort of draft of a proposal in 2025. That is cold comfort to people who are being stalked right now. But I think long term, this is sort of our best, our best hope, our path forward. What about the standard that Apple and Google are already using in order to detect AirTags? If we can get other manufacturers of physical trackers like Tile, hate them, to start using this standard, wouldn't it be like a great big win? Turns out kind of no. So this is a paper by Matthew Green, a cryptographer at Johns Hopkins, which he wrote and presented very recently, in which he and his graduate students looked at the privacy problems having to do with the standard that both Apple and Google are now using to detect the presence of AirTags. And it turns out that while it is good for anti-stalking, it's actually kind of crap for the privacy of the people who own the AirTags. And so one of the things that Matt and his students have done is not only did they show a very serious privacy problem, but they also, oh, thank God, suggested a clever cryptographic way in which to fix it. Unfortunately, that means that everything has slowed down a lot, because not only do you have to take into account the sort of security and privacy needs of people who are being stalked, but you also need to take into account the security and privacy needs of the people who are running around buying these physical trackers and then attaching them to things that are important to them, like their keys and their wallets. You do not want an enormous network where you can find sort of like the name of everyone and the location of their keys. That I am pretty sure that the people in this room don't need me to think of a bunch of examples of ways in which that can go really, really wrong. Last of all, I did promise to talk a little bit about the role of researchers in this story. I think that researchers have actually played a very central role in helping us to understand what is going on and in moving forward with protecting people from this kind of tech-enabled abuse in the Apple ecosystem. And the ways in which they have done that is that researchers were able to show real-world harm. At a time when Apple AirTags came out and I started criticizing them, one of the very first things that I started hearing from Apple fanboys was essentially, you are making harms up. You are making up problems. And so being able to show like actual people who are being stalked is a very big deal. Researchers are able to test companies' claims. You may remember from earlier in this story that there were several times when the companies made claims about things that they had done and how well they worked that were simply not true. Somebody has to go and test that shit. Researchers are also able to anticipate harms that the companies missed. This is one of the things that Matt Green and his students said, if you go ahead and you implement the system for all physical trackers, what you're going to do is you're going to create a tracking network for everybody who has a physical tracker, and that is bad. And then finally, researchers are able to propose novel solutions, which I think is really important because Apple is not the be-all and the end-all of research. They are not the be-all and the end-all of threat modeling, and they are certainly not the be-all and the end-all of proposing solutions. And so this is an area in which every single one of you can really have a tremendous impact. Thank you very much.
Questions?
I don't know if we have time for questions.
Do we have time for questions? Well, yeah, first question for me. Thanks, Eva. Really appreciate your time and also just energy invested into this obviously very problematic situation, to say the least. I'm surprised, but also not of just Apple's faux pas in this. Like, could you talk to maybe, like, were they just unaware of this problem, or like, because they seem to come off as this company that deeply cares about privacy and users, and we know that's maybe not always the case, but like, were you surprised that they messed this up so badly? And even when you then go and talk to them about it, like, why are they still dragging their feet? I mean,
well, there are a couple of different reasons. I mean, I think it is It is wrong to think of any company as a monolith. Companies are made up of people, and some of those people care, and some of those people don't care, and some of those people think about the tech-enabled abuse use case, and some of them don't. Some people think it's really important to be able to find their wallet or their stolen bike, and they think that's more important than the lives of people who are being stalked. Again, an actual argument that I have had. So I think that there were definitely people at Apple who were extremely surprised that Apple chose to launch this extremely half-assed set of mitigations, which is one of the reasons why they have had to make these iterative changes. But I think that by far the biggest faux pas that Apple made when they launched this product was like the most Apple mistake that I have ever seen in my entire life, which was that they could not think about the safety of a person who doesn't own an iOS product. They just couldn't imagine that weirdo that exists outside of their ecosystem. And they couldn't imagine that they might have some sort of obligation to protect them. And a lot of the problems around this product have really stemmed from that fundamental blind spot that Apple people have.
Would their solution be tell them to buy an iPhone or something?
That is their solution.
Wow.
I have a gesture that I use at times like this.
Funny but not funny. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Quick question. So I'm curious if any of these companies were held liable, if at all?
There are
Company?
2 ongoing lawsuits. The lawsuits move very, very slowly. But yeah, there's one class action lawsuit against Apple on behalf of people who have been stalked, both people who use Android phones and people who have iPhones. And there is also a class action lawsuit against Tile on behalf of people who have been stalked using Tiles.
Thank you.
Hi. So I think recently we've seen the general public become more aware of privacy rights online. And we're still relatively new to that. And I was wondering who regulates this? Whose job is it to regulate it? Is it the consumer to know what's happening and research this? Is it the companies? Are they supposed to regulate themselves, or is it the government who is supposed to come in and make these rules for these big companies? And if so, are there any laws on this? Can you say, I've been stalked online, and, can that person be held responsible because of a law that someone recently made? Because I know it's really hard. Government's not catching up too quick.
Well, to be clear, stalking is illegal in every state in the United States. If you are stalking somebody using an AirTag, or if you are stalking somebody using stalkerware, you are breaking the law. How often do these people get caught or held accountable? Not very often. But that is a problem with our courts and with our justice system. It is not a lack of laws. I am very, very careful whenever somebody tells me there ought to be a law, especially when laws already exist and I notice they're not doing much. Having said that, there are already, sort of 2 legal theories that courts are considering, having to do with whether or not Apple and Tile do hold some responsibility in the use of their physical trackers for stalking of individuals. And that is a pretty big deal, but we're still waiting to see how those court cases turn out. In the meantime, yes, privacy legislation does exist. Data privacy legislation even exists. California actually has some of the stronger data privacy protections in the United States, which is admittedly a fairly low bar. And whether or not they do any good is quite questionable. I can tell you that one particular piece of legislation that I would be extremely excited to see would be just any kind of comprehensive data privacy legislation at the national level, so that I don't have to go and make this argument in every goddamn state in the union. Unfortunately, trying to pass legislation at the federal level right now is, let's go with an uphill battle. I'm not holding my breath.
Good luck, Toss.
All right.
Hi, so I appreciate the concern that you have, but it seems to me that this is relatively easy to solve, but find the hole in what I'm thinking. So it seems to me the basic problem is Bluetooth that's around you that moves with you is a concern unless you are aware of it or have authorized it in some way.
Yeah.
It seems fairly easy to make an app that sees all of the Bluetooth around you if you move at some 100 feet away or a mile away and Bluetooth goes with you. If it's not on the approved list, you get an alert.
Well,
Now,
there.
let me finish, sorry.
All right.
The problem I can see with that is if you go out for dinner with some coworkers, let's say, and they have Bluetooth around them, you have to be very careful about what that movement looks like, because the app I'm thinking of would alert on that, because you've got somebody that's got earbuds or anything else, AirPods in their pocket that's Bluetooth, and it would be moving with you if you went in the same car. So I can see some issues with the alerting. So you can either over alert or under alert, depending on how you set the boundaries there.
So yes, I have thought about this issue, and I did an entire research project on it last year, which I presented as part of this talk. So a lot of these apps already exist. Some of these apps exist only to tell you about one specific type of of object that might be following you. They can tell you whether or not you're being followed by an AirTag, but they cannot tell you whether or not you're being followed by a tile. And then some apps like AirGuard can allegedly detect all the different kinds of physical trackers that may be following you. But as you could see from the graph that I presented earlier, that's simply not the case. For example, the AirGuard, I think, did not detect a single Chipolo, which I thought was really interesting because in their release notes, one of the things that they said when I tested this thing last year was, we've just added Chipolo support. So yeah, yes, in theory, you've totally got this down. In practice, absolutely not. The next problem is that I don't want to live in a world where in order to know whether or not you are being tracked by a physical tracker, you need to download an app. I think that your phone should automatically do this in the background all the time. It should do it accurately, and it should do it about every single type of physical tracker which exists. And in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to go to the IETF and we need to work out a standard that all of the makers of physical trackers will agree to use, which will allow them to be detected in a consistent and predictable way, which we do not have right now, while also protecting the privacy of the people who own the trackers themselves, so that we do not create a tracker-tracker network.
Yeah, so I'm worried about what we do in the meantime. That solution is probably 4 years out or something like that, given the pace at which the standards organizations move.
Cool, I haven't thought about that. No, I've actually thought about it. Most of this talk was about that.
Yeah, sorry. I don't mean to criticize. I'm just trying to problem solve.
Next.
I know you talked about it. I just wanted to have more of an understanding. What was that the group that was trying to create understanding that you presented in the slide? Yeah. So I'm just trying to understand, like, is that just trying to create like a framework of like best practice to use, or
I did not spend any time talking about what the Coalition Against Stalkerware is or what it does, because I had a limited amount of time, but I'd be happy to tell you. The Coalition Against Stalkerware is a coalition of 50 different companies, nonprofits, and academics that all work together in order to increase awareness about stalkerware, improve detection of stalkerware, have a better idea of how stalkerware is affecting victims of tech-enabled abuse. So one of the sort of categories of people that we have in the coalition are people who run safe houses for people escaping domestic abuse. And one of the first things that we did was we just came up with like a shared definition of what stalkerware even is, because it turned out that didn't exist. And then we help the sort of AV industry and people in the security industry to stay on top of sort of what new innovations stalkerware makers are engaged in, and find mitigations for those.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. All right, here we go.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay. So what you've gone through in this presentation, please forgive if I approach this question with any naiveness. What mitigations would you offer to, I mean, and I don't even know if you can talk about this for the protection of your victims, but like just thinking and empathizing with your victims, like what mitigations do you offer them to immediately protect them in a world where the technology isn't and the companies aren't taking that responsibility?
I mean, right now, if people come to me and are concerned about being tracked by a physical tracker,
Yeah.
I usually start with an Android phone running AirGuard and run a scan to see which physical trackers are present, run several scans, hoping to catch them over time. That will not necessarily catch everything, but that is the best that we are able to do right now.
Follow-up question, because I did jump on Google based on your chart, it freaked me out. Is there not currently a scanner of it, like hardware that is at that radio frequency for Bluetooth? Because it was saying something about, I mean, I was on a weird Reddit page, so maybe I'm wrong, but it said something about a BTLE stack for that frequency. Where like, has anyone created hardware for these victims that could more accurately scan regarding like?
As far as I know, lots of people have tried to create hardware. None of it has worked well or consistently. This is one of those problems that's very easy to fix in theory, but in reality is actually a nightmare.
Totally.
This is one of the reasons why I am pushing so hard for all of the makers of physical trackers to agree on a standard. Because one of the big problems is that all the makers of physical trackers use different methods.
Yeah.
And they change them over time.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying is like, it might be naive. I'm not like a hardware engineer. I just thinking like, oh, applications are limited to the hardware in a phone. Like, I wondered if anyone dedicated that engineering to like a specific, so yeah, that's difficult. I'm so sorry for those victims.
Yes, they're trying. Yes, it sucks.
Yes, it is. Okay, fair enough. Here you go.
Thank you so much, Eva. Really appreciate it. And round of applause one more time.
Thank you.
Thank you.